You've reached the Narrow Way Podcast. Leave a message after the beep.
When was the last time you heard a sermon on not only the gate, but the way? He says, there is one gate, but after that gate there is a narrow way. There is no way to come through this narrow gate except you strip down and strip away all self-sufficiency and all self-righteousness, and you humble yourself and you come as a little child into the kingdom of heaven, and it is a narrow gate whereby you can only come.
You're listening to the Narrow Way Podcast.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Narrow Way Podcast, and wishing each and every one of you a very happy New Year. Hope you had a good one, didn't stay up too late, got plenty of sleep, because after all, isn't that your New Year's resolution, to be a happier, healthier, wealthier you? Maybe not. At any rate, we're going to talk about that in the second half of this program. Thanks for clicking in. Don't forget, subscribe to us on YouTube and thumbs up on YouTube also, if you have a mind to. Also follow us on Twitter, where we share all the nifty, groovy, swanky, lit things that we talk about here on the Narrow Way Podcast. All the resources. The Twitter handle is narrowwaypod at twitter.com. Do you have to say at twitter.com? Maybe, I don't know. Really technologically savvy on this program here. Starting off with four articles and or news stories that didn't get a whole lot of attention in the past year, that is 2017. I'd like to share those with you because I would just hate for these to go out into the Ethernet and have no chance to talk about them. So, some of the stories that I failed to bring up like I should. Number one would be Reformation 500. Yes, I did touch on it, but that might be the biggest thing that happened church-wise, theology-wise, last year. Reformation 500, the 500-year anniversary of the Reformation, and Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. It was a massive thing. It is why we are Protestant. It is why we have a solid theological system in place today. It is why we have the Council of Trent and the Council of Ananias, and there are so many things that came from the Reformation. We have a separation from the Catholic Church. We don't have to buy indulgences, not that we did before that, but we have so many clear-cut differences from the Catholic Church now that we can hang our hat, and it's a big, important thing. We have 350,000 evangelical Protestant churches in this country that we probably would not have had if it was not for the Reformation, and there are about 7 different gentlemen and one lady who really made it possible and important for the Reformation to take place and even continue once it did take place. That's the first thing, Reformation 500. The second thing, on a downer now, the slaughter of the people at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, Texas. There were 26 people killed in that church on a Sunday morning, including the fill-in pastor and his family, and there were 20 or more that were wounded. A disturbed man walked in and shot the church up, which leads me to a Thom Rainer article. He has some... normally on theology blogs and Bible blogs, you don't expect to get an article like this, but Thom Rainer really put out an excellent read shortly after that massacre took place, and I think it's something that everyone in church leadership needs to read because it is so important. He talks about the importance of securing your worship facility. You want to go to church to worship God. You don't want to be distracted by the thought of what happens if some guy comes in the back door with a machete or a gun or a chainsaw or whatever. And that would allow the church members, the people going there to worship Jesus Christ, to worship without having to have that nagging, tingling sensation in the back of their head. And it's important because nobody wants to talk about violence when you walk into church, but I think it's a necessary thing that we need to talk about. As Thom Rainer says, he makes it clear, don't be in denial over a church shooting. Don't ever walk into church and think it'll never happen here, it'll never happen to us. That's impossible, it's unthinkable. Yes, it could. Absolutely it could. You need to have a plan. You need to be prepared. And whether that's 3 guys with concealed carry that sit in the back row, or whether it's an actual church security team, I don't know that you need to have a committee formed for church security, but then again, it might not be a bad idea because it is a relevant problem. It's something that needs to be thought about and talked about. Number 2, invest in security. It's an investment, not an expense. Thom Rainer also makes that very clear. Don't say that you don't have the money to go out and help people get their concealed carry permits and classes and all that if you live in a state that requires that. It is an investment, and it's an investment that I think the church needs to make. Maybe hold off on the overhead projector for all the worship Hillsong music, and maybe go get some security or invest in some security. And then the last thing you can do to prevent something like that, the most important thing you can do to prevent that, according to Thom Rainer, is pray. Pray for security. Pray for peace inside of your church. Pray that nothing like that would ever happen, but also pray that you have the resources and the ability to stop something if indeed it would happen. So that's the second thing that I wanted to touch on. Number 3, moving right along, Benny Hinn's nephew. And just when you thought that nothing good could come from that sentence, here it is. Costi Hinn. I think that's how you say it. C-O-S-T-I. Costi Hinn. He was a catcher. No, not a baseball catcher. He was a catcher when his dear old Uncle Benny slain, past tense of slay, when he slayed people in the spirit. He was a catcher at the Benny Hinn charismatic rallies. And then all of a sudden he met this girl. And just as most of the time happens when somebody meets a pretty girl, they start to question everything. And he did. Because you see, this girl that he met didn't speak in tongues. She couldn't heal anyone. And furthermore, she said that Costi Hinn probably couldn't heal anyone either and probably wasn't really speaking in tongues. And poor old Uncle Benny was probably not able to speak in tongues or heal anyone either. And all of a sudden, things started falling into place for Costi. She gave him Bible verses to read, talking about when Paul said that the gifts of healing and the gifts of signs and wonders had ceased. And he started to think about that. And all of a sudden, it made sense when he said, Uncle Benny, a lot of the prophecies that you are prophesying, they kind of contradict the Bible, right? And of course, Benny would say something like, well, don't put God in a box. Well, Uncle Benny, how come you speak in tongues and nobody interprets it like the Bible says there should be? There should be an interpreter after somebody speaks in tongues. And Uncle Benny would say, well, don't quench the Spirit. You're quenching the Spirit. Of course, he had a cooler accent than I do when he said that. But then Costi Hinn, Benny's nephew, he started to think about how at all these rallies, the emotions were just such, and the music was such, and the key change came at just the right time. And he started to think that, in the Hinn family, even though we have mansions and custom suits and all of these things, I think we're making Jesus a genie. I think we just have to rub him the right way. Isn't that how Benny is doing things? Treating Jesus as a genie? He's actually the King of Kings, isn't he? And Costi Hinn left his uncle and Benny's brother, his father. He left their ministry, and I believe, as of right now, he is pastoring a small little church in California. That is a story. That is a real testimony. To forsake your nephew, father turns against son, son turns against father. Isn't that exactly word for word what Jesus said in Matthew? That is what happened in the Hinn family this year, and I think Costi would have it no other way. That is a real testimony for the goodness and the graciousness and the saving power of God. We'll be right back after the break. Hear the Kingdom Heirs with no bones about it.
One day when my life's work is done and my time comes to die, well, they'll lay my body in the ground and say one last goodbye. But when our Lord is ready and the trumpet calls me home, that grave won't ever hold me. Just like Jesus, I'll be gone.
No bones about it.
Jesus isn't there. The tomb in which his body lay is empty and bare. They'll never find an artifact, not even a hair. No bones about it. Jesus isn't there.
And we're back on the Narrow Way Podcast. Thanks for clicking in again, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget, like us and follow us on Twitter, NarrowWayPod at twitter.com. Also, if you'd like the show emailed to you daily in your inbox whenever a fresh one comes out, email us at the old name, and that is nonamepod, the number 1, at gmail.com. nonamepodcast1 at gmail.com for the show to be emailed to you. Put in that request there. And if you have any questions, comments, conundrums, or snarks, like Todd Friel would say, send us an email. That's the way to get a hold of us. And then NarrowWayPod at Twitter. Hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe, thumbs up if you like what you hear. And if you don't, disregard and move on. Now, it is the new year. This is January 2nd. Shout out to my dad. Happy birthday. This is January 2nd, and this is the time that everybody starts to forget about the resolutions that they made on January 1st, because this is the day after, and most people don't remember what they did this morning for breakfast, let alone yesterday for the resolution that they made to try to keep for the rest of the year. So, I would like to talk about that. To be more precise, Jordan Standridge from Cripplegate wanted to talk about that, and I'm merely passing on some of the information that he has put out on Cripplegate. Very interesting things if you think about resolutions. You know that almost 75%, that's 3 out of 4, 75% of all resolutions are not kept each year, and I'm betting it's even higher than that if people are actually honest with the pollsters. Most people do not keep their resolutions. Why? Because resolutions have 3 main purposes: to be happier, healthier, or wealthier. In other words, they're meaningless. In other words, people do not take them seriously because they really don't have any substantiation, easy for me to say. Being happier is not a bad thing, being healthier is not a bad thing, and being wealthier is not a bad thing, but they are very, very hollow, and they're meaningless to be happier, healthier, or wealthier. If your resolution is to read 1 novel a week, that's fine. It may make you happier, but in the grand scheme of things, playing the long game, it's going to do you 0 good, along with hitting the gym 2 days a week. That's going to make you healthier. It's not going to do you much good. It's not going to make you necessarily a better person, a happier person, or a more fulfilled person. Saving 3% of your income every week and putting it into a stock account or IRA or CD. If you're stupid enough to put it in a CD, you need to make a new resolution to read some of Dave Ramsey's books. But that's going to make you healthier, but you're going to still have that hollow feeling in your heart at the end of 2018. And you're going to make another resolution that is meaningless. And you're going to make another resolution in hopes that maybe this is the one. Maybe this one will make me feel happy. And as much as I hate to use the phrase, you have a God-shaped hole in your heart, better yet, you have a God-shaped hole in your life, more than likely. You see, what happens is you make these resolutions. And all of a sudden, when you don't feel any happier or healthier or wealthier, and you don't feel fulfilled after living up to these resolutions, you decide, well, it's not working, we'll just quit. And that is when the 75% of resolutions fail. Because they don't do any good. And to even a greater extent, you read the Bible through. And you have a speed reading contest to read the Bible through in a year. Not a bad thing on the face. But then when you skip a day, and now you have to read 30 chapters instead of the standard 15 or whatever it is, you get behind and it becomes a burden. You don't want to read the Bible, but you made the resolution that you have to, and you don't even really want to read through all of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, but you do anyway because that's part of the resolution. And meanwhile, you don't read through the red part of the Bible, the good part. You don't read through the red part of the Bible, but once a year. And sometimes you skip over some of the verses that you need to be reading once a month in hopes of just reading it through in a year. And that's the problem with resolutions. Basically, they are something that you can brag about. They're something you can talk about at the coffee shop with your friends, how you're going to lose 15 pounds this year and you've only got 20 left to go. And it really doesn't mean anything, does it? It's kind of pointless. What Jordan Standridge says from Cripplegate, what is a resolution's purpose? To be happy, healthy, and wealthy. But then he goes on to say that if Christ is not in the resolution, it is meaningless. And how true is that? So you save an extra $3,000 this year. Wonderful. Now what? That is most heathens' entire lives. When you're not worshiping God, your life is meaningless. You go to work. You put food on the table. You put money in your pocket. You go to work, you have a good job, and you have fun. And then you spend the money that you've made at work to go on a nice vacation one time a year. And then after vacation, you go back to work so you can pay for the vacation. Then pretty soon you've got enough left over to go on another vacation and you drive a nice car. And then you have to go to work to pay for the nice car. And it's a vicious cycle that never ends until you die. And what do you have to show for it? When it's all said and done, what have you got? You've got a life where you stayed fairly busy. You've got a wife. You've got some children that know how to play sports and the piano maybe, and they've got talent and they won a beauty contest or whatever, and you've got nothing to show for it. You go to your grave a rich man. Congratulations. Now what? When you're living for Christ, when you make a resolution that is God-centered, how about praying once a day? How about waking up and starting each day off praying? How about you make a resolution saying that you're going to pick one Bible verse a week just to think about? You pick a proverb a week that you think about and you apply to your life. Now you might have something. Now you are making God the essence of your life, the center of your life. Now you have God on the throne of your life, and you are focused entirely on that. And I guarantee you, you may not be healthy. This is not a roadmap to being healthy and wealthy and fulfilled and happy and wealthy and happy and healthy and wealthy and wealthy and happy. And it's not going to necessarily do all of that. Again, like I said a couple episodes ago, the Christian life is not about winning football games, it's not about selling more cars, and it's not about keeping your marriage under control or being the best firefighter you can be. Nothing wrong with the Kendrick Brothers movies. They're great movies. But that's not necessarily how the Christian life works. Ask David Brainerd. He died witnessing to Indians at the age of, 31 or 32 in the colonial days of America? Ask the people who are missionaries in China or sneaking Bibles into the USSR, the old USSR, might as well be with Putin. But at any rate, ask them how happy they are. Ask them how wealthy they feel doing stuff like that. The Christian life is not about being healthy, wealthy, and wise. There are so many more things added to that, and you might not become healthy, wealthy, and happy being a Christian. That may not be in the cards, so to speak. And now all the Baptists are screaming at me because I said cards. The Christian life is about so much more. You will be happy when you worship Jesus, but that is not the goal. That is not why you are worshiping Jesus. You worship Jesus. You follow Jesus. You take up your cross daily because you want to serve God, because he has done so much for you that you want to live for him, not because it is a means to an end to be happy, healthy, and wealthy. Now, some of those things may happen, but that is not the goal. That is not the thing that you're shooting for here. So remember that when you make your New Year's resolution, maybe you have to amend it a little bit. Maybe you need to edit it. Maybe you want to think about changing it up a little bit so that God is the center of it. Just think about that as you're living through 2018, trying to keep up with your newly made resolutions. You're listening to the Narrow Way Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for clicking in. We'll talk to you next Monday.